I think it's still an evolving space. And I think, my advice for those young people would be the most important thing you can do is be yourself and be comfortable in your own skin. The rest will come.
My name is Ash Thompson.
My name is Harper Hugo.
My name is Brent.
Yes, my name is Michael Fair.
Mabuhay! My name is Melinda Velga.
We are Drag Out the Love, and you're watching Queer in Alberta.
Mwah.
Welcome back to Queer in Alberta, the podcast where we chat with 2S LGBTQIA+ Albertans to hear their stories. I'm your host, Kels Valenzuela Delamarter. I use she, her pronouns, and we film the show right here on Treaty 7 territory in the city of Lethbridge, Alberta, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Oti-Pimsawak Métis government in the Alberta District Number 1. Before we get started, I want to wish everyone listening and watching a happy Pride Month. I hope you're able to gather with your community this month, maybe attend some local drag events or shows, and to celebrate, as well as reflect on what Pride continues to mean to you and to our community here in Alberta. I have been off to a busy start this month, to say the least. I had my drag debut at the first ever drag show hosted in the Crow's Nest Pass. My drag persona is named Topsilog, and I quickly followed up my debut with an appearance at Tabor Pride and hosting a reading with royalty at the Lethbridge Public Library. So it was bam, 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 thing after thing, and I absolutely loved it. Top has a few more gigs booked this summer, and I'm hoping to see more. This is my call out here, but I have one coming up in particular in Calgary on July 13th. So Calgary, please come and see me. I need some friendly faces in the crowd. I'm a bit nervous for my first big trip in drag to the big city. Now, if you want to follow along with all things Topsilog and drag, you can follow him at topsilog.xo on Instagram. I also have to say it's been so sweet to see, and also kind of crazy how the internet works, right? I created the account and immediately so many other Filipino or Filipinx queer drag performers were finding and following me. And it was really cute because one that I super admire is named Sam Pagita. They're based in, I think, San Diego in the United States. They messaged me and they were like, anything you need, us Filipino kings, we got to stick together. So it's just been so welcoming, and I'm so excited to see what else happens on this drag journey. The second thing I want to tell you before we get into today's episode is very quick, but I have just joined the team, the brand ambassador team over at Devon & Lang. If you've been looking for cute, comfy undies, this is the place for you. Devon & Lang was founded by Tyler and Dana McCombs in 2019 in Calgary, Alberta. Tired of constantly buying premium boxers that did not provide the support or comfort that Tyler was looking for, he and Dana set out to create some truly life-changing underwear. They had a goal to create underwear that was built to support you all day, didn't chafe or ride up as you went through your day, and used the newest technologies built with environmentally sustainable fabrics. I especially love how socially conscious the brand is. They continue to give back to local community here in Southern Alberta with every pair sold. Now, if this sounds exactly like what you've been looking for your next undie purchase, you can use the code QINAB15, QINAB15 as the numerals, at their online checkout to get 15% off your order. And you know what? 15% of that total will go right back to me with Queer in Alberta and support filming future episodes of the show. So this is a great way to show some support for Queer in Alberta while getting some cool undies at the same time. So today's episode is brought to you by none other than Stringam LLP. And for those that don't know, Stringam is a regional law firm serving clients through their professional, tailored legal services. I want to give a massive thank you to Stringam for supporting these episodes of Queer in Alberta and for enabling us to take the show on the road. I've teased this a little bit and we had envisioned doing it a lot sooner in the previous year, but things got busy, so we're doing it now. If you are listening in Canmore, Grand Prairie, or Fort Mac, we are headed to these communities to film this summer. So send me a DM if you are someone in these communities or you know somebody that I should interview. I would love to get in touch with you and see about sharing your story through these episodes with Stringam. So for today's episode, we are actually sitting down with the CEO of Stringam, Kurt Schlachter. Kurt grew up on a family farm near Bow Island, Alberta, and believes strongly in the importance of both getting involved with and giving back to one's community. He has served on the board of directors of the Downtown Lethbridge Breeze and the Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southwestern Alberta. He is the past president and chair of the board of directors of Economic Development Lethbridge, is a retired member of the University of Lethbridge Senate, and served as chair of the University of Lethbridge Board of Governors from 2016 to 2022. Kurt is also a philanthropist and has personally supported many different pillars of the Lethbridge and area community, including the Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation, Lethbridge Polytechnic, the University of Lethbridge, Lethbridge Family Services, the Southern Alberta Art Gallery, as well as a number of other charities. In 2023, Kurt and his spouse established a first-of-its-kind endowment fund to support 2S LGBTQ+ students at the University of Lethbridge. So when my partner graduated from the U of L, Kurt was actually the one who gave the commencement speech to her graduating class. He devoted the speech to speaking particularly about 2S LGBTQI+ rights, issues, representation, diversity, as well as the importance of critical thinking at an institution like the U of L. Listening to his impassioned words, I knew I had to reach out to him, and it blew my mind that A, he said yes to an interview, but B, this led to the support that we're seeing from Stringam now. In the interview, we talk about what it was like for Kurt growing up in Bow Island, Alberta, which this is a scenic destination I had never heard of before interviewing Kurt. And I went down a very fun Reddit and internet Google search to try and learn more about it, inspired by my friend Katie Lohr from Canardian. That's how she gets a lot of the information for her guests on her podcast, which I was lucky enough to guest on maybe a month or two ago. So go and check that out as well. We also talk about how Kurt has seen Lethbridge change since he was a student here in the early 2000s, and we get to listen to some of his expertise from his work as a lawyer and how he balances his queerness, professionalism, and takes up space here in the community through his advocacy. And stick around because at the end, we close off the interview with some audience questions that you submitted, particularly concerned about if you're outed at work, about what's going on with the Alberta government, and what's happening with the book bans. These were some of the topics that were on the mind of the audience when I had Kurt in the studio. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce you to Kurt, the CEO of Stringam. Thank you again for all of the support. And here's to having the first ever queer lawyer on the show here on Queer in Alberta. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We are so excited to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Did you ever think that this would be what you're doing on your Friday, Saturday, whatever day it is?
I didn't, but I'm happy to be here.
I think I mentioned when we were talking about the episode that we have an opening segment. It's called Quickfire Queer. Do you think you can handle it?
I'll do my best.
Okay, I have some faith in you. Are you ready to go?
Ready.
Let's do it. Which pop diva would you want representing you in a courtroom? And you can pick style over substance here.
I think it would have to be Adele.
Adele? Mm-hmm. What is the inspiration behind Adele? That was a quick pick for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, kind of a super fan, even though I've got lots of pop divas I love.
Yeah.
I like her. I just like her her style, her charisma, and mostly her sass. I think she would bring it home.
She would win your case, 100%.
Totally.
Like even just watching her Vegas performances on like YouTube, she's bringing it.
Absolutely.
Which legal drama is the least accurate but most iconic, if you can think of one?
Well, probably Suits, because I started watching it and couldn't get past about the third episode because I thought it was too outrageous and unrealistic.
I've never seen Suits, so that's a knock on that one.
I've heard it's really good. People who watch it like it, but I just couldn't get into it.
But this lawyer cannot get into it. That's true. What's the queerest legal term in the dictionary?
Ooh.
I love the look on your face. That was good.
I'm struggling with that one.
Queerest legal term in the dictionary. For me, it's just like objection, but
very
on the nose.
Legally Blonde.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very Elle Woods.
Yeah, no, I'm drawing a blank on a term. I was hoping to come up with something really funny, but
Well, we can come back to that.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll ruminate and sit in the back of your
probably,
brain,
yeah.
and you'll be like, this is it by
This
the
is
end
it.
of the episode. Which fictional courtroom would you absolutely slay in? TV, movie, or otherwise?
A Time to Kill.
A Time to Kill.
Yeah. It's like a Southern racially charged drama. John Grisham. I used to read John Grisham's books before I.
With a
became a lawyer.
very good poster. Like, I'm looking at this and it's painting an image from a very specific time frame.
Yeah, it's got like the cool vintage like Southern
So
courtroom
cool.
vibes. Lots of wood, old wood and mahogany and such.
I love that this is your pick. It does seem right, being like a lawyer based in Southern Alberta, to pick something that's like, here is my experience. True to life.
Right.
Life.
Yeah,
Okay, so the answer was A Time to Kill. I'm going to have to watch this movie later.
that's good.
All right, your final question, Kurt, is since this episode is kicking off Pride Month, do you have a go-to pump-up song or queer anthem that you blast before you take on a big case?
One that probably is the most intense one that I would go to is I don't actually know what it's called. The song is called. I haven't saved it in my Spotify list, but it's
Just ready.
yeah, but it's from the vampire movie Blade, and it's very like intense, trancey.
Yeah.
If I really need to get myself pumped up, that's the song.
That's the vibe.
Yeah.
That's what you're driving on Whoop up to the courthouse. I think that's funny. It almost speaks to the intensity of the law,
Yep.
field, career, all of that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm the guy who will listen to trance music at 7:30 in the morning, getting ready for work, and just blast it because it gets me going.
There you go. Well, that was your quickfire queer. You survived it.
There we go.
Congratulations. I'm very proud of you. That was a great, great start to the interview. But, I was thinking about this episode together and how, well, first of all, you are the first lawyer we've ever had on the show. So how does that feel?
Pretty cool.
Pretty
Good to
cool.
know.
Just a typical Tuesday, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then my reference point for law, I think, is like a lot of people where, as you mentioned, Legally Blonde, which is probably the most campy iteration of that experience. But have you ever heard of this video game called Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney?
No.
This is homework for you.
Okay.
And so ridiculous. When I was like a kid, this video game made me think I wanted to be a lawyer because it's like a Japanese video game with anime characters that go, objection, and all this kind of stuff. That's what I thought it was. So I was like, that sounds fun. That sounds very, very cool. I even have a couple pictures here to show you to like get the mental image. Like, this is what I thought you were.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a suit and tie that color, so
You
that
do.
tracks. Yeah.
And you grew up in Southern Alberta, but in a small town called Bow Island. Now, I had never heard of Bow Island before I was prepping for this interview with you. And I did a quick Google search and found somebody that I think you might recognize over here.
Oh, my friend, Mr. MacBean.
Is that his name? Mr.
Pinto
MacBean?
MacBean. Yep.
I thought first glance that he was a potato, but what is the story of Bow Island and Mr. MacBean here?
Well, yeah, Bow Island has a few claims to fame. At one point, anyway, I don't know if it's still the case, but it was the pivot sprinkler capital of the West because there's a lot of irrigation,
Okay.
farmland around there.
What a niche title to be
Right?
like, this is us.
But I don't think at some point along the way that became sexy enough. So then it became the bean capital of the West because one of the main crops grown around there is beans. Lots of producers are growing different kinds of beans in the area.
Right.
And so that statue, or whatever you would call Pinto,
The icon herself.
right,
Yeah.
was put up. And it was probably in the I would say late 80s, maybe early 90s, sometime in there, that they came up with this as the town mascot, and then erected this giant tribute to him. And it was kind of controversial at the time, but yet everyone sort of loves Pinto. And then the other thing they did is our water tower was turned into, if you drive by and see it and look closely at it, it's a giant bean pot.
Are you serious?
It looks like it has handles and a lid on it.
This
They
is
rigged it up.
too good. I didn't
Yeah.
even know about the water tower. Now I'm going to have to make a road trip because
Yeah, it'll catch your eye when you drive by. So you coming through from Lethbridge towards Mesenat, you see the water tower first on the left, go through, and then you can't miss Pinto.
That's so good. And, I'm looking at his cute little face here, which we will put on the screen for the audience to see. And I'm like, how could anyone view Pinto as controversial? He's an angel. So we have Pinto, we have the water tower. Already it sounds like something out of a Hallmark movie, this place that you grew up in. But can you maybe describe a little bit more about what your hometown was like? And then perhaps even maybe realizing you were queer in that kind of space?
Yeah, I mean, certainly not a particularly diverse place, small town, right? 1,500 people or so at the time I lived there. Very much a farming community.
Yeah.
Ag as the core industry driver, and, everything else you would find in a smaller town.
And you grew up on a farm too, right?
I did grow up on a
Yeah.
small family farm, yeah. And the schools and churches are sort of the main fabric of a town like that. And so
I get it.
Yep, definitely. The main social fabric was related to school, and then the different churches, lots of different churches represented, obviously, in such a small town. And so my upbringing, was I would say pretty homogenous. Not exposed to a lot of diversity. Went to Catholic school for the entire time, so was very much brought up in that faith background. And as far as growing up as a queer person there, it's hard to explain without the benefit of hindsight, but I was still, coming to terms, questioning, figuring out who I actually was. There was a lot of deep denial going on at the time because
for sure.
of, the complexities of a faith-based upbringing and all that means and all that was projected onto you about what being different in that way may mean. So I don't think I ever really allowed myself to go there and think rationally about it.
Yeah.
I was too sort of too scared, too withdrawn inwardly to really think about it in that perspective. But so now I just look back on it and think, for me it was more just doing my best to try to fit in, but also doing my best to not draw attention to myself in a way that was not the right ways. So I was drawn to, academic performance, always had the highest grades in my class all the way through, was the valedictorian of my small little class.
Very casual, no big deal.
Was the athlete who played on all the sports teams, did the yearbook committee, did all the things, right? So that I was just sort of this good kid who had I think a good reputation and was respectful of, people around me and was involved in the community in the right ways. And essentially, I think just like a lot of young people, trying to find my way through that.
And, I think like you and I can relate in some of those experiences, because for me, growing up in such a small environment in an age where for me, the internet was just starting to kind of take off, nothing like what it is today. So in terms of representation, it was like queer was something that existed in maybe like LA or far, far away, big places that had nothing to do with where I was. So there was no representation both in media, and I've said this before on the show, but in my day-to-day world. So for me, it was like, I didn't even know that I was queer, or what I was experiencing could be that kind of like queer experience, because I didn't have the language, didn't have the understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my experience as well, right? Like, so context would be, I grew up on a farm. We had what we called peasant vision. So like three channels. You got CBC, CTV.
Do you have like the antenna on the TV?
Yep. We had the tower antenna. We were a little fancier, so
that's
you could get better
cool.
reception.
Good
Sometimes
for
you would
you.
get a couple stations out of Montana, but other than that, there wasn't much. It was like CBC, CTV, and what's now Global. And that was it. So the representation, I mean, I remember it was a big scandal. A couple things that were really impactful to me was, Ellen DeGeneres coming out
Huge.
in and around that time. And then as a result of that, her show getting canceled and all the backlash. And there was, I was a big fan of Beverly Hills 90210, the first version back then. And then there was a spinoff called Melrose Place, which there was a scene where one of the characters was gay, but they just sort of talked about it. And there was a kiss between him and another character that one of the other characters saw, but it was more like a quick peck where they sort of just like blurred out the actual kiss.
For
but
2
it was
seconds.
again, this big scandal.
Yeah.
It got a lot of attention. So that was it. And then, fast forward several years later and Will and Grace came out and became more sort of indirect. But at the time I was, a teenager going through all that. There was no one in my community who was, openly or even, I think, suspected of being in part of the queer community. So
Right.
there was just no, like you say, no language, no one to look towards as a potential example or representation of any sort.
Yeah. And, if I may, your experience, I was thinking about it, and I hear like maybe from people that are skeptical of queerness, or in particular, like how many young people are identifying openly as queer today. They're like, oh, it's because of media. It's because of this thinking that's being purported in the mainstream culture, right? But for your experience, you didn't have any of that, and you still wound up being a queer kid in Bow Island with Pinto MacBean.
Right. Yeah, there was nothing, and like you say too, no internet, right? Like, so at least kids nowadays, if there isn't anyone, if they're living in a small place where there isn't anyone locally in person who they can look up to, or I see themselves represented in, at least they can find someone online, or they can follow and get some similar interests. Be like, okay, there are people like me, and this is okay elsewhere. This is normal.
Exactly.
And that's so critical, right? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have internet at all until after
Which is
I
like the
left home.
before times. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. I didn't have internet. I got a cell phone after I left home for the first time.
So
That's
cool.
the era I grew up in. Yeah.
Like a little sidekick or something.
Yeah, it was a Motorola flip phone.
So cool.
Oh,
Was
yeah.
it the Razor?
No, that came later.
I remember seeing those. Like if you had the Razor, and I think it was the pink or the gold one, you were bougie.
Those were
You were
hot.
so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So we grew up here in Bow Island, and then you moved to Lethbridge in the early 2000s for your undergrad. And when we kind of talked about brainstorming this episode, you referenced that being as like a big thing for you in terms of shifting your worldview, meeting more people. Let's talk about the impact of Lethbridge for you.
Sure. Yeah, and just a minor correction, it was actually the mid 90s that I moved to Lethbridge. So 96 was the first year that I lived in Lethbridge, and it was interesting. It felt like a major change, and moving to
Huge.
a big metropolis relative to what I was used to, in the sense of suddenly you could go to 7-Eleven and get food 24 hours.
This
you
is
could
civilization.
You could order takeout. You could do all the things. You could
Yeah.
go out and stay out late and go to nightclubs, which with my generation were a big thing. That's how a lot of people met. We didn't have social media and other ways to meet that people now rely on. So it just felt like there was a whole new world available to at my fingertips. So I was I was very quickly drawn to having more of an urban lifestyle, or at least as much as Lethbridge offered at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And the benefits that came with that. And then, of course, immersed right into the university context and everything that provided me, the people that I met, the different, exposures that I had to different people and different backgrounds, that was immediately beneficial.
It makes me even think of your convocation speech when you were talking about the U of L specifically being a space for liberal education and meeting so many different people from different disciplines, and how it really encouraged not only like exposure for you, but critical thinking. And it's something you've carried with you ever since.
Yeah, that's a huge part. I attribute a lot of who I am today to that foundational experience. I believe I wouldn't actually have been able to get where I am today without it, because it was so foundational, so transformational to be able to think critically, which is sadly becoming a lost art, and is frankly under attack, I think, by
in a
certain
clickbait
political
society.
ideologies, right?
Yeah.
It's there. Frankly, there's no greater threat to certain political regimes than critical thinkers, and so
You're so right.
it is something that is strategically being or at least attempting to be compromised or minimized. So that is critical. And then the liberal education piece, it's really interesting because it's so misunderstood. It's such a strong, it's a huge foundation of the U of L and what distinguishes that institution. What I described, I think, in my speech as the university special sauce, because it does bring so much more than just the basics of the education, and creating that, those deliberate transdisciplinary collisions that happen and those exposures to other areas of thought.
What was Lethbridge like in terms of like coming out for you? Because I don't think you came out in Bow Island.
No, and I didn't come out the first time I lived in Lethbridge either. So I came out after I went away to law school, came back and was settled and was actually a fully admitted, fully fledged lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So since my time moving back here, which was now, it's about 21 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, that experience was, it was a journey.
A nice little chuckle as we
Yeah.
go down memory lane.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. It's one of those, major life events that, it's the biggest thing in your life at the time, and looking back on it, you sometimes wonder, oh, did I make a bigger deal out of that than I needed to?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think so. In the end, I think it needs to be what it is. It needs to be a big deal and it needs to be what serves the person right at the time, and recognizing it was also a different time 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Things had improved, reasonably from when I first left, my hometown to then, and they've improved dramatically since then to now. But it was still a time where there was uncertainty, and there
Definitely.
was fear, and there was a lot of worry about different things, from family to career impacts and everything in between. So I just did my best to navigate that, I think, at the time, and made a decision that this has to happen one way or another, and we'll hit the bumps and deal with them as we need to, but just made the best of it and moved forward. And that's kind of my personality is, I'm always moving forward. I try not to dwell on things and look back and get bogged down into what could have been, what might have been, what could have been differently. It's more just keep going. And sometimes, all you can do is put one foot in front of the other.
Definitely.
And keep going. And I think that was kind of one of those times.
I really admire that. And I think you and I had, again, like a similar experience when we were talking about it in the past, kind of making sure that we were both as individuals in a place where we felt secure and comfortable, that like, if we're going to tell the people we love and share this part of our lives with them, and say worst case scenario, it doesn't go the way that we're hoping, we're still going to be okay.
Yes, exactly. It sounds so dramatic when you look at it in reverse, but that's exactly how it was for me. I had to rationalize essentially, everyone who was the most important people in my life, from loved ones, family and loved ones, to closest friends, essentially saying, I don't accept this part of you, and therefore I no longer want you in my life. And I also had to be, accept the financial implications of that, knowing that I could look after myself, support myself financially if any of that ever happened, as someone who'd just been through a lengthy education process and had the support of my family and my parents through that. And so, yeah, it's a bit jarring, but you had to feel, I think, secure and grounded enough in those components, and feel like you were strong enough to take all of that.
Yeah.
That risk on, in order to then be ready to launch that into the world.
Yeah. And like, I think coming out is something that is, again, so specific to the individual. Like, not everyone is going to have the same cookie cutter experience.
Absolutely. I think it's a very individual thing. You have to find the right way. For some people, it's very subtle. For some people, it's so obvious that they don't really need to.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of those people. So that, in many ways, I think that was fortunate in the time that I grew up. But in other ways, it made it harder to have to actually make that more of a deliberate public announcement, if you will.
A public announcement, a PSA.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, there is definitely no one size fits all. It has to be what's right for the individual.
But let's take a second and maybe reflect on your career now. We've talked about coming out, your personal journey, as well as touching on your career trajectory. When you were first a lawyer, I think it's probably an easy thing to say that queer lawyers or 2S LGBTQI+ representation in the field might not have been what it is today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say there were a lot fewer, at least, open members of the community at that point in time. And those that were known were almost like a source of spectacle to some degree, or gossip, at least, in the sense of, oh, this is, this particular lawyer is a member of the queer community. They're whatever their individual story may have been, from they were in, traditional long-term straight relationships and left those to come out, or they were just coming out themselves, etc. But it was almost like people had to go out of their way to qualify that this particular lawyer was a member of the community, whereas now it's not really as much of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's lots of us within the broader legal community, and I think there probably always were plenty of us, just like in the broader, society. But people were less able and willing to be open about it, and because of that, it drew more attention for those, sort of trailblazers who were, that became, the first thing, like almost like their first identifying characteristic. When I speak about being, a queer person, this is just one aspect of who I am.
Yes.
It's not my entire identity, but I think for those people at that point in time, and those of us who were coming out, early on, and there's people who came out plenty before I did, but it was like that was the identity fixation. It wasn't about any other part of their individuality or background, or even their ability as a lawyer. It was like, they're the gay lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even that aspect you were speaking to there of like kind of having to keep it closer to the chest for previous generations, I think that's really widespread throughout not even just law, but various professions. A mentor of mine from my work in museums and heritage, we went to the Alberta Museums Association conference, and it was like, for me, my first big one in the career. And I was like, wow, this is so unexpected to be in this room and see so many visibly queer people in this sector. And we just had a conversation about it. And he was like, well, when I was your age doing the same thing, it never would have felt like this. Like, we were there, but we couldn't be so open again about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that made it harder for, individuals to connect as people with, similar backgrounds and attributes, and to create a sense of community around that as to what they have in common. In addition to being lawyers, we have this characteristic. We're a member of this community, that we can develop some bonds over that. If it's a lot harder to do if you're withholding that or being very careful about that piece of yourself.
Absolutely. And, it makes me think too of our other discussion when we were preparing for this interview about that piece of like queerness and then professionalism, and how there's still sometimes that struggle of those two elements coexisting.
Yeah, I think it's still there. I think, we've made some great progress, especially in the 2000s and in the last decade, but also we have a lot of regression happening. And so we have to keep our eye on that as a community, for sure, and also rely on our allies for that. But it seems like in certain professions and certain contexts, they can be in conflict, right? It's like you can be queer, but you need to not be too queer.
Yes,
right?
like a certain limit.
There's a limit. You can't make anyone uncomfortable. You can't be too out there, etc. Now, in fairness, I think that applies to anyone, regardless of their, sexual orientation or gender identity, as far as like, there are just certain contexts when somebody with, bright pink hair is going to make somebody who's old school, very traditional, very conservative, just feel like a fish out of water. And I think that there is some of that as well. Not condoning that by any sense, but I think it is, it's easier for people who are, sort of part of who are the default, so you say, members of our community, to relate to somebody who's different than them, who's not too different than them, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're mostly like me, you're just different in this way. Whereas if it's too much for them all at once and they've not been exposed to diversity, including queer people, then I think it seems very alarming to them. And then there's also a perception. I mean, the law still remains an inherently conservative profession, and there are other conservative professions where people are worried about business and they're worried about, we don't want to alienate a client if they have their own views and biases that may compromise this business relationship. How do we navigate all of that while we still value you as an individual? We still want you to be part of our organization and all the benefits that brings. We have to remember that this is a business at the end of the day, and we can't potentially alienate clients. Or alternatively, you have to make that decision and be prepared for those impacts.
Exactly.
And that's part of, a bigger, much more complicated conversation, part of what we're dealing with all the DEI controversy that's going on, et cetera, right now. less so fortunately in Canada than in the US, but it's there for sure. Just to give you an example, right? Like how I'm dressed today when I first started my career would have been considered probably too loud and out there,
Groundbreaking.
right? I would have not, even with a tie, whereas, nowadays if I was still doing work in court, I would quite comfortably appear in court, not in jeans like I'm wearing today necessarily, but a dress pant that's complementary to this and a tie. We always wear a tie as a sign of respect, but but no one would look twice at it. But in my early days, I would have probably gotten yelled at by multiple judges for wearing a loud pattern.
That's so
because
wild.
we were told that it was, court is a serious place. You're meant to be there. It's somber. You should always choose colors. It's not a fashion show. And so, somebody with loud, anything loud and out there, even, like facial piercings, for example, would have been controversial. Whereas now I think we've moved, albeit slowly, but progressively to the point where even the oldest, crustiest judge isn't going to come at someone over their personal appearance. There's a fine line. And in fact, there have been some cases where the judges have been, disciplined for making comments around that.
Which good.
So they should be, because at the end of the day, you're there, your personal appearance, we should be able to be free to express ourselves. In fact, we're constitutionally guaranteed the right to do that. And so as long as you're maintaining professionalism and how you're presenting, you're being respectful to the court, etc., it shouldn't really matter what your color your hair is, whether you have a piercing or within reason, what you're wearing, as long as it's appropriate for the context you're in.
How dare you wear this absolutely flamboyant out the door outfit onto my podcast today? It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
I know. I'm sorry. I should have chosen a somber color.
Yeah, you should have. But you know what? I will forgive you just for today. But that's so interesting to think about. And I think I wanted to talk about your experience and how things have changed. Because even even though you say that, the amount of young professionals that I've had come up to me and say they still feel that struggle of like, I don't know if I can be out in the workplace, or I have to kind of palette myself. It's clearly something that we haven't 100% moved away from yet.
Yeah, I think it's still an evolving space. And I think, my advice for those young people would be the most important thing you can do is be yourself and be comfortable in your own skin. The rest will come, because as people get to know you and respect you as an individual, they get to know and respect your work, they're going to become more comfortable with you sharing that part of yourself. But at the end of the day, it isn't always necessary for you to do that. And I don't say that in the sense of you shouldn't disclose or you should be, afraid or ashamed to. But if you're feeling uncertainty or discomfort around impacts of doing so, there's a couple questions to ask of are you in the right to ask yourself, are you in the right environment, or is there something within you that is preventing that? Are you perceiving something more that's there more than it actually is? And so I think, the best thing you can do is be, authentically yourself and not turn it into a big in your face thing. Most now corporate business environments have events, social events, etc. Bring your partner if you have one. You don't need to make an announcement of it. People will fill the gaps and introduce them that way. Or if you want to be more authentic about it or more open about it, then sit down with the leadership of the organization and say, hey, like, I don't know if this is known, but I want it to be. So, can you give me some guidance on how we navigate this together? I want to be comfortable. I don't want to have to tiptoe around all of that. But, the other thing I'll say is, and it's just an unfortunate reality and impact until society continues to evolve further, coming out never really ends. I still have to 100%. Do it all the time in multiple contexts, especially in business. And you have to make that decision in the moment. And for the most part, I would say 90% of the time I correct when people, ask me the question of, do you have a wife and kids? This, the implications, the assumptions. Most of the time I'll correct them. And just because I feel like I'm in a position of credibility and authority to do that, I owe it to myself, to my relationship, to the broader community. But there are times when I just don't have the energy and it's just not significant enough for me. So I will either just move away from the question or, answer in a generic way. Also, there are times when I know the person is asking and they're a good person. They're not making an assumption for any prejudicial reason. It's like, I don't want to embarrass them. turn it into a whole big thing. So I'll just move forward. But the fact that I still bump into that regularly in my life at this stage of my life, 21 years later after coming out, being open and out there as far as, you know, who I am in my community and beyond, I still have to bump into that
all the time. Even if you go to a restaurant you've never been to before with your partner, right? Like, you're visibly queer and then you're not always sure how people are going to respond. It never ends.
Never ends. No. And I look forward. I hope I experience the day someday when it does. And, you know, there is no longer a default, and it's just not even an issue that people look twice or ask questions on. Do I think it'll happen in my lifetime? Maybe.
We can hope.
We can hope.
We can hope that you can dye your beard pink and go to court.
Exactly. Yeah.
One thing you had shared as well is that earlier in your career, maybe you didn't have that same confidence in terms of being as publicly out. What was that moment that you decided with Jason, no, we do want to be more visible in the community?
I don't know that we were as deliberate or strategic about it. It was more just that we were sort of at the point of, I don't care anymore if somebody doesn't like this.
Got it.
I'm tired of tiptoeing around. We're happy. We're together. So it started in, you know, sort of a slow progression of just, you know, me making it clear, even though we were already in a relationship and living together, not everyone at my workplace knew that. I decided to make it known. Okay, people need to know this. You know, it's going to start becoming a thing of gossip. So I sat down with, you know, my key mentor at the time, and we had a conversation. And then, you know, Jason didn't have as much to deal with there as far as his work people. He'd been out longer than me. Other people knew, et cetera. They knew about us. But then as far as community-wise, we just started attending events together and being sort of, you know, open and unapologetic about who we were. And then as we started to become more and more involved in the community and emerge as, you know, leaders in our respective careers, it just sort of was like known. Everyone knew that we were a couple and we were together, and it was never an issue from our perspective.
Yeah, it just sounds like, as we said way earlier in the conversation, you got to a place where you were both secure and ready to do this on your own terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. You have to be grounded, confident, comfortable, or at least most of the way there. If you're not, I would recommend, you know, taking a cautious approach to it, because you don't want to take on too much too soon if you're not ready for some of those impacts. But in the end, I found, you know, we've been fortunate to not really bump into any issues just by being ourselves, being authentic, and letting people see us for who we are as individuals, and who we are as a couple.
And, you know, it makes me think about one thing you told me about the environment at Stringam, and how, like, even if people are coming from sexual and gender differences or different religions, you're able to not only collaborate together as colleagues, but to have maybe disagreements or different points of views with always having that mutual respect for one another. That does not happen overnight, especially in a really polarized world like what we're seeing right now. Maybe what advice do you have for whether people in the workplace or in your own relationships trying to meet each other halfway?
Yeah, I think it doesn't happen automatically. It takes some effort, and it takes, you know, approaching it from a position of respect and willingness to listen, willing to recognize I have a totally different perspective than this other person because they have a different background than me, but that doesn't mean we can't respect each other as individuals or try to understand their perspective if we don't get it. And I think that makes us stronger, you know, and in fact, we know this, you know, the literature tells us diverse teams are more effective, perform better. Businesses with diverse teams are more profitable. No kidding. It makes sense, right? From our firm's perspective, you know, it took leadership at the time, you know, somebody like me to be the first and only person who I was the diversity metric in our firm at the beginning, right? To then, you know, gain a reputation of being a good lawyer, credibility that comes with that, and moving forward, the rest of the members of the firm who were very homogenous and, you know, had not dealt with someone like me, deciding to embrace that, and then us moving forward together, and then along the way attracting other people, creating a space where, you know, everyone can have a seat at the table who has, you know, value to offer and perspective to offer. And I think it's allowed us to become what we are as a firm today, and those different perspectives. Just as an example, we were light for a long time on having women, not members of the firm necessarily, but at the partnership table. We've now improved that significantly, and having the perspective of those women has been incredible. And just some of
no surprise.
the things, it doesn't surprise me at all, but
Yeah.
just even my own perspective as a gay man of like, I'm more aware of the perspective of women, because a lot of the closest people, friends, family, most impactful people in my life have been women, but I'm still not a woman, and I don't have the whole context.
Yeah.
Just to see how they think differently, and the ideas that will come from that then we can adapt and implement across the firm is incredible.
Yeah, I think like the theme of it is, regardless of how diversity and EDI specifically right now has turned into this political talking point, it is a strength fundamentally.
For sure. That's all it is in the end, is about creating space for those different perspectives and backgrounds to be able to collide, removing barriers so that you can create a diverse team that is high functioning. There's such a misconception that it's all about just finding a person who checks a diversity box without them having any merit of their own or not having the right qualifications, when in fact that's not what it's about at all.
100%. Yeah. And, as we're kind of nearing the end of our interview, I had some people, as I shared with you, send in some audience questions. So the first one is from my friend Rain. He's wanting to ask about steps to address maybe work discrimination as a trans person in the workplace.
I think from Rain's perspective, it's important that he be open and authentic about his identity. So if that's already happened and he's bumping into issues, then it probably requires a conversation with leadership of whatever the organization is to say, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling like I'm bumping into discrimination issues. Hopefully, and perhaps they can remedy it on that basis if it's brought to the attention of whoever, supervisory leadership. If not, then he'll have to consider what the other options are for him, including, looking at leaving and claiming wrongful dismissal and constructive dismissal, and or looking at a human rights complaint of some sort. The challenge there is, that's not easy, and it's a process to go through. But it doesn't mean it shouldn't be pursued if there's merit to it. But the key is, he needs to express that this is what he's experiencing and this is what he's dealing with, because from the employer's perspective, if they're not aware that that is what he's feeling and experiencing, they can't correct it, and they need to be given an opportunity to correct it. Conversely, from his, once that's been flagged, then there's a duty to address those things from the employer.
And I think too, doing it in that manner provides documentation of the experience if you do need to pursue it at a higher level.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if it's an environment where he's otherwise, wanting to continue to be a part of, I think framing it in that way is, I want this to work out. I want this to succeed, but here's what I'm running into. I need your help.
Thank you for that. The next one is from Dree. They also have a question kind of similar to this. It's on employment law. It seems that's what's on everybody's brain, hearing that we have a lawyer on the show today. But they want to ask, how do you navigate retaliation after revealing your sexual identity at work?
Similarly to what I just explained, I think it would depend on what they're dealing with specifically and where the retaliation is coming from. Is it from coworkers? Because that's a whole other issue. But again, the employer has a duty to address that. But they need to bring that to the attention of the employer if it's not known. If it is and they're not doing anything about it, then that's a problem. They have recourse via, constructive dismissal claim and or human rights would be the main steps there. But to point out to the employer that this is happening, if it's the employer themselves, then that.
And just kind of hearing these things and reflecting on it myself, I think a lot of queer people would maybe, it'd be safe to say that when facing something like this, there's almost a fear of risk in speaking up, and if things can maybe get worse. I don't know. I think there has to be an assessment of like what is best for you, but what advice would you have in that position?
I think so too. Like the thing to keep in mind is you definitely have rights and there's definitely recourse you can pursue, but it isn't immediate. So you have to have a strategy of, okay, what happens if this goes really badly? Either I can't continue in this environment for my own health, so I need to leave, and then pursue that. Do you have another plan? Can you support yourself? Do you have another option, etc.? So do you want to line something up first before you make that big decision? If you can manage in the short term, if it's not totally intolerable, I would say have a strategy and a plan to protect yourself.
For sure.
Yeah.
This is from Alyssa in Edmonton, but it says Bill 27 goes against the Alberta Human Rights Act and the ABHRA trumps it, but teachers and school staff can still be disciplined for not following Bill 27, and the Alberta government is now in charge of teacher discipline. How can teachers protect themselves while upholding the human rights of their students?
Bill 27 is the one that requires, I think, I believe it's the one that requires them to disclose to parents if the kids come out.
The Education Amendment Act from 2024. But yeah,
I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. So I think, firstly, I'm not convinced that bill is constitutional. And so there's that whole issue. And I don't know if anyone's taking a run at it, but I hope they do, because I think it's horribly misguided. And, I come back to that, and I've been asked this question a lot in various different settings from well-intentioned people. But my answer is, if you're in a scenario where a child is coming out to someone at school, first, you need to ask yourself why. They're not in an environment, in their home environment, where they feel safe to do so. And you need to question that. And the real problem with that bill, as I understand it, and the rationale behind it is, well, if there's a unstable or abusive home environment, the child welfare system will look out for those kids. That's ridiculous for a few reasons. First of all, that's a big complex system that doesn't move at a lightning pace. They have their own resource constraints, and they're not necessarily, or I know they're just not necessarily, they're just not well equipped to deal with emotional abuse in particular. So you're going to lose those kids before anyone can intervene and do anything to the things that we see, the high risk factors, suicide, homelessness, drugs, all of it, before they can be protected. And so that's a ridiculous argument to say we're going to force that disclosure and then hope the system protects them. No, you should be asking why you're forcing that disclosure in the first place. But as for the question of the teachers, it puts them in a really difficult spot.
Of course.
I don't know. I think if it were me, I would. It's easy for me to say this,
Right.
but I would probably be defiant and just not do it, and take my chances and then make a constitutional argument. Depends how much they want to stand on their principles, but I think it's just a horribly misguided, probably unconstitutional bill, and people need to stand up for it. But they're right in the sense of the disciplinary impacts that can happen, etc. Now they do have a strong union that can potentially help, but I don't know what the union's position on this bill is, and there's a whole lot of complexity and wrinkles to navigate there. So I think they can just do the best they can. And I think I would lean on leadership locally if I was a teacher in that position and had this actually happening with a kid who I was worried about. And that is, I guarantee you, why this teacher and other teachers are worried, because they know what I just said is true about them not necessarily being safe, and they've come to them with this information for a reason.
I am so grateful, first of all, to have you on the show, but especially because of your career expertise. Something I've wanted this show to be is a space to amplify and advocate for our community, and to have someone like you with the knowledge and the terminology and the understanding be able to help us as well learn about these things. It's huge. When you talk about it being unconstitutional, I think I understand you, but for folks that maybe are still needing to get why is it unconstitutional, would you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, so to simplify it as much as I can, constitutional law is complicated, and I'm certainly not an expert in the field, but the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees all of us certain things. And,
yes.
It's freedom from discrimination, oppression, etc., and all sorts of other rights, from equality to language, etc. It's I would recommend to anyone. It's actually, for a complicated document, fairly easy to read, and I would encourage
What a
all
relief,
Canadians
yeah.
to pull it up and just read it so you understand what it actually says, because it's such an important document. And it's one of the things that distinguishes Canada is we have that constitutionally entrenched Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So when something is unconstitutional, essentially what it's saying is the government overstepped their authority in creating this piece of legislation because it discriminates or it limits rights here and there. And then the courts will look at it and determine that's the case, and they'll render it unconstitutional and strike it down. And there's umpteen cases over the history of the country from all different provinces and all different types of legislation as to where that was the case. But here, I think, the arguments would be around equality in particular, right, and safety. So I think it discriminates, it hones in on a very vulnerable segment, right, of the population. And frankly, I said earlier, it's misguided, it's unconstitutional. It's also a dog whistle. Let's face it, at the end of the day, it's much like the new book ban stuff we're seeing. And I think that is also wildly unconstitutional because from a freedom of expression perspective, which is also protected under the Charter, it's really problematic. But also, and the even bigger concern to me is that it's based on falsehoods, right? So it's the same with the order in council or whatever it was that was rolled out regarding gender affirming care and this whole ban on gender reassignment surgery for children under the age of 18, as though the government was doing something to intervene. It's a fake situation that never existed. That wasn't happening. The Medical Association was already not allowing for that to happen, and so it's a pure red herring. And what we're seeing now with this book ban too is the type of books they're claiming to save the children from don't actually exist or are not actually in libraries that they have access to. So when I say dog whistle, that's what I mean. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if it is, even if some of those books do exist, there is still, a freedom of expression that can be relied upon. And I think it's a very slippery slope to say this is, potentially pornographic or all the other characterizations they're making.
And I mean, even
pushing agenda on children, etc.
I think 3 out of the 4 books that our government specifically outlined in their media release were, of course, about queer content. So it's not hard to see what's being done here.
Yeah, it's obvious who's targeted, and I think it takes an analysis of what is the actual content.
I had a few more questions for you, but as I said, we are running short on time. Is there anything left that you wanted to address with the audience about your experiences or anything you wanted to share?
I don't think so. No, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
I think we did. This was an ambitious and I think very successful episode.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure to chat with you about all of this and
about Mr. Pinto MacBean.
Pinto MacBean, yeah. I think I have a shirt with Pinto on it somewhere. I might have to dig it out
actually? Tonight. I need one in a crop top, I think.
That would be great.
It would be so good. We could match. I think I see it.
Maybe that's our pride outfit.
I am so excited. You, me, Jason, and Sarah, Pinto MacBean coded.
Love it.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening and watching to another episode of Queer in Alberta. Thank you again so much to Kurt for coming into the studio as, again, our first lawyer on the show. It really was something special to not only hear his story and to learn more about the work that he's done here in Southern Alberta, but to have his expertise on these current issues that we're seeing with the UCP government, the book bans, and things that as a queer community we need to be watching and keeping an eye on. So I'm not 100% certain when the next episode of Queer in Alberta is going to come out. Definitely hit subscribe or follow so that as soon as an episode releases, you are the first to know. If you want to follow along with me, you can follow at Kels Valendela. That's KELS.VALENDELA on Instagram and TikTok to see what I'm up to as I'm filming behind the scenes content. And don't forget about those Devon and Lang undies, bestie, because any support we can get while also getting you looking cute, I'll take it. No matter where you are listening from in the world today, I hope you are feeling celebrated, seen, and loved for the wonderful person that you are. Until next time, happy Pride. I will see you later. Mwah.